To Diversity Jobs Group webinar about women in the workplace and the challenges that women face. My name's Bernadette. I am an account director for Diversity Jobs Group. And for those who don't know who Diversity Jobs Group are, we are a suite of 10 ED&I job boards. Our focus is to engage and attract talent from marginalised and underrepresented communities, providing companies with a broader choice of diverse talent. And we provide job seekers with bespoke job boards that embrace diversity by building communities. Today, we are diving into a relaxed and open discussion about the unique challenges that women face in the workplace. And I am thrilled to be co-hosting this webinar with our two incredible guests, Gemma from Smurfit Westrock and Sarah Smith from Leonardo Hotels. So we're going to hear about the measures that both Smurfit Westrock and Leonardo Hotels have implemented to create a more inclusive and supportive work environment for women in their organisations. So I'm now going to hand over to Sarah and Gemma to introduce themselves, and then we can get cracking. Okay, Sarah, Gemma, I don't know which one you want to go first, Sarah.
Yeah, I'll do the introduction first. So I'm Sarah. I'm one of the assistant group HR managers here at Leonardo Hotels. I've been with the business for nearly 6 years, 6 years in July this year. I've worked in a previous role within the company. I used to be a cluster HR manager and got promoted into this position in 2022. My role covers everything from DEI to our wellbeing strategy as well.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So my name's Gemma. I am head of talent and learning and development for the UK and Irish cluster within Smurfit Westrock. So I appreciate we're not a name that many people may be familiar with. We're a manufacturing business. We're a global leader in making kind of paper-based packaging products. So lots of things come in a cardboard box these days. So you might not know our name, but a lot of the brands that we support, you will know, and you will be using products from us day in, day out without knowing it potentially. So I have been in this particular role for just over a year now, but I've been within the business for nearly 12 years somehow. Because prior to this role, I worked in some sort of HR divisional business partner roles in different clusters in the organisation. So the part of the business that I sit in is the UK and Irish cluster for corrugated. So we have about 35 manufacturing operational sites across the UK and about 4,000 employees. So my role in talent and L&D is really, really varied. But essentially, it's about trying to support people to reach their own unique potential, whatever that might be in our organisation. So everything from recruitment, so attracting talent in, to developing talent throughout the employee life cycle kind of sits with me, really. So yeah, excited to be here today, and thanks for inviting me, Bernadette.
No, thank you both so much for taking the time out to join us today. It was lovely to hear about your your life within Smurfit Westrock, and for you, Sarah, about Leonardo Hotels. So I guess the first thing that I'd like to ask you both is the primary challenges. What primary challenges have you found that women have faced within your organisation, Sarah?
So for us, I would say probably the primary challenge we come across is things around sexual harassment for women. So some of the most recent data suggests that 13% of women have experienced some form of harassment, whereas only 7% of men have received some sort of harassment. And obviously recently we've had the change around law with sexual harassment as well. So it's now more of an onus on businesses to prevent and be proactive in that area. So that's something that we've been taking a lot of time around within Leonardo Hotels. We've created a suite of training to help roll out across the business to educate our managers so that they can spot sexual harassment when it's happening and nip it in the bud, basically, so we can prevent that. And it's just not part of our culture that we want to have in the business, and it's something that we're trying to eliminate.
That's really, really positive, because there's just so much sexual harassment that goes on in the workplace. And what are sort of like the outcomes of these implementations that the Leonardo Hotel have put in place?
So
Have you seen an increase in reduction?
I would say so, to be honest. So the ER cases that come through to myself and my colleague, we review some of the most complex and serious ER cases in our business, and there is probably a reduction within that. I don't have any stats around that, unfortunately, but just kind of colloquially, I would say there is a reduction there. It's just more of an education piece as well, though, but people also being more aware of what harassment is, and also probably the confidence to come forward and bring that up when something's happened to them. Obviously, we've had the Me Too movement going on for a number of years now, but the fact that we've done training with our senior leaders, so that's people on our exec, our general managers, hotel managers across the business, they've all had targeted training. They've all attended that, and there's been training for the whole business as well. We've recently rolled out a new piece of training called Be a Leonardo, Be Yourself, and it covers everything in the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but there are pieces in there around harassment and how to prevent it, but also what to do if you witness it or if you are a victim of it, and how you can stand up to it and be confident that we will support you as a business.
It's really, really, that's positive. It's so positive and really good to hear that. And Gemma, how have you found, what sort of kind of challenges have you unearthed with regards to women in the workplace, really?
So I think from a Smurfit Westrock perspective, because we are primarily a manufacturing business, we have a lot of women working in kind of shop floor, factory-based roles, as well as all of the sort of, typical functions that you'd find in a business: accountancy, HR, finance, IT, etc. But from a shop floor perspective, I think one of the challenges that we've really explored, just on a really fundamental level, actually, over the last few years, is our workwear. So when a lot of the uniforms, for example, they've all got health and safety, high vis, and various things built into them to keep our people safe. When they were designed, they were probably designed by men for men, and they didn't actually think about things that might fit a female-shaped body. Yeah. So, one of the things we've done, we've put in place a female workwear catalogue so that women have the option to choose something that still fits within our guidelines, but actually fits them properly and they're comfortable in, when they're working their shifts, really. And similarly, from a sort of facilities perspective, so just making sure they've got adequate facilities to shower and get changed in, and they're private and they're separate. And, I know they sound very, very basic things, but, go back 10 years, that wasn't necessarily the case. So, we've done a huge amount at that level. And then, I think one of the things Sarah mentioned there was around confidence. And I think, the other, or perceptions and confidence, I would say. So again, there are some perceptions, when we've spoken to our male colleagues and said, well, look, you will often recommend your son to work here, or your dad to work here, or your uncle to work here, so your other male relative, but we don't often hear from you, here's an opportunity, would you consider my wife or my sister or my daughter-in-law, for example? And we started challenging actually why, some of the men, why wouldn't you recommend your female colleagues to work here? And actually a lot of it was perception about the types of roles that women would and wouldn't be interested in. I think there was some, a lot of what we do now is actually automated. So there is some manual handling and some lifting, but actually that is nowhere near what it used to be. And we have lots of tools and safe techniques and automation to support some of those things as well. So a lot of it is that sort of perception piece that we've tried to address. And then going on again to that confidence and the imposter syndrome, we have a lot of women that are very capable to do lots of different positions, but it's about, someone's ability to believe in themselves and push themselves forward, because we know there's loads of research actually that says, if you look at a job description, for example, if a male colleague is looking at it and they can do 50% and they don't think they can do 50%, they'll probably apply for it. But if I'm looking at it and I, as a female, and I can't tick every box, I probably won't go for it. So a lot of what we've done, we've done a lot of sort of development work. We've put in place the RISE programme, which I'll probably talk about later on, to really support women to have the confidence to put themselves forward to reach their own abilities, because I think now that is one of the biggest challenges that we face.
Right, okay, that's very, very true. I mean, life is in the workplace is so much different to what it was 10 years ago, without a shadow of a doubt. So did you say that you have implemented these processes now? So how have you found what kind of results are you seeing? Are you seeing more women applying for the roles, or having the confidence to apply for roles?
Yeah, we are. So yeah, from the facilities and workwear perspective, that's kind of we've dealt with that, so that's not really an issue anymore. So our RISE programme is something that we've been running for a few years, but more recently kind of has been a focus of the UK and I. And we are seeing a big increase in the amount of women now that think about their career goals and think they are capable of achieving them within Smurfit Westrock. We're seeing a big increase in terms of the number of people that talk about the networks they've got within the organisation. We have mentoring as part of that programme, and although it's not actually designed to be like a talent accelerator programme to promote people, actually what you do see is the knock-on effect, because if you improve the confidence, then people do go for that. And when we look at our sort of pipeline because we sort of look at roles and when they might become available and who internally might be getting ready for those roles. When we look at our pipeline, there is definitely more females in there than there was even a year or 2 years ago. So we really want to focus on trying to continue to build that.
Well, that's very, very positive that you are seeing more women applying for those roles. So you're clearly doing all the right things, like as our Leonardo hotel. So that is really reassuring that they are in place. And we need to get more women doing these sorts of things, these sorts of roles, because it has historically been very male dominated. So yeah, I think that's fantastic that the measurements that you guys are putting in place to overcome these challenges, really. So have you personally ever encountered any biasness or stereotypes, and if so, are you willing to share any examples that you have experienced?
Yeah, I'm happy to, but just to circle back to something that Gemma had said there around the uniforms, that was really, really interesting, Gemma. Thank you for sharing that with us. And it just reminded me that years and years ago within hospitality, the standard was women will wear high heels and a skirt for their uniform. That was what the uniform was. But within Leonardo, we've done a lot of work, and we really try to make our uniforms gender neutral. We don't say that we have male and female uniforms. We try to cater for all genders and our transgender colleagues as well. So for a number of years now, we've not stipulated that you need to wear high heels as a woman. If you want to, absolutely, more power to you. But you're on your feet for 8 hours a day, sometimes longer. If you want to wear your comfortable flat shoes, that's absolutely okay nowadays. And if you want to wear trousers, they're available to pick from the uniform catalogue as well. And
such a refreshing
anyone
change.
can pick whatever they are comfortable in. Our strapline for our DEI strategy is be yourself. So the uniform's such an important part of that. When you come to work and you're dressed in your uniform, you want to present yourself as yourself. You don't want to stifle your individuality, I suppose. So people being able to choose what they wear to work and remain safe and professional looking is really, really important. So thank you for picking up on that, Gemma.
Yeah, that was a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think, it sounds like a really basic thing, doesn't it? But actually, if you're trying to progress the culture in your organisation, you can spend loads of time, talking about, the culture, but unless people see some visible signs, and actually for colleagues that wear uniform, that's a fundamental part of their identity, and it's what they wear day in, day out. And I think to get that right it just enables you to open up the conversation about other things. Whereas if you're trying to talk up here about some really strategic things, but actually people still don't have workwear that they're not comfortable in, that's quite a challenge, isn't it? So yeah, I agree on that one for
Definitely,
sure.
I would 100% agree. And again, going back to what you were saying, Sarah, about women wearing heels all day, you know, gone are those days, but it was very much back in the day you would wear heels and a skirt and not trousers and flats, etc. So, you know, I think that's an amazing thing that companies are now doing to allow women to feel, like you say, more comfortable, more at ease with their appearance. And you know, sometimes, like when you were wearing skirts, going back to the sexual harassment side of things, you know, when you were wearing a skirt and heels, then you know the kind of things that were going to happen, just because of the, you know, the way that some individuals can be. So I think that is really, really refreshing. And I could not walk around in heels for 8 hours in a day. Definitely not. I couldn't do it these days. Maybe years ago, but not now. So thank you both so much for that insight. That was really, really helpful. So going back to the biases and some examples there.
Yeah, sorry, I sidetracked
that's
us there
fine.
a little bit. So I've not always worked in hospitality. As I say, I've just been at Leonardo hotels for coming on for 6 years. My background is mainly in food manufacturing businesses. That's kind of where I've built my career up. And as Gemma explained about her company, they're often male-dominated environments. So I've been in that aspect. I've been there as a young female trying to progress my career. And unfortunately, I've had comments, you know, when you're in that position as the HR advisor, trying to advise and guide your managers in the business, there have been men that have turned around and said things like, you can't tell me what to do, you don't know anything, you're just a little girl. And comments like that around age and being a young female have been directed at me previously. It's not something I've ever come across in Leonardo, thankfully, but that's my personal experience of it, and I hope Gemma's not got something like that to share.
No, I mean, I would say, you know, historically, yeah, you know, there've been things like that for me in previous organisations. I guess I'd come at it from a slightly different perspective, you know, when I was thinking about this. And if I reflect back, maybe 5, 6 years ago, you know, I think this was probably to do with my imposter syndrome and my confidence at the time. I was part of a management team, leading a number of business units. I was the only female and I was new. Everybody else had worked there for a long time. And I think I put myself in the role in these management meetings of, does anyone want a tea? Does anyone want a coffee? I'll sort the lunch. I'll sort the dinner reservation. I'll take the notes. Nobody was putting me in that position actually, apart from myself, because I felt like sometimes there was a gap and somebody needed to fill it. Sometimes it was just that I wanted a cup of tea, frankly. But, you know, it ended up like that sort of became my role because I created that. And I think when you create it, then it becomes expectation like, oh, Gemma will take the notes. But actually, I wasn't there as a note taker. I was there as a HR professional to offer my guidance and, you know, whatever else was needed in that meeting. And I think the change, well, there's probably a number of things really that contributed to a change in that. One of which was when we launched our DEIB strategy, which is called Everyone. So probably a, you know, similar vein to Leonardo, Sarah. And what was really good about that, we had a leader at the time in the division that I was working in. And as a management team, we actually sat down and had some really good, frank, open conversations. And everyone around the table kind of called out some of the stereotypes and some of the things that they thought that we did, which perhaps weren't in line with that strategy. And it actually wasn't me. It was in one of my male colleagues, I think, that raised like, why does Gemma always take the notes? And we were like, actually, I didn't even know that I still did it, but I did it because it was just a habit. And it was a, you know, it wasn't really a conscious decision, but over time it had become the way. So actually we had an open conversation. We said, okay. And, you know, sometimes when we had visitors to sites, it would always be the female that would organise the lunch, for example. Not because it was their role, just because typically that was who it would fall to or who people would turn to. So this particular leader in our business made a real conscious decision actually to change that. And, as an example, we then rotated notes. So it would, we went through an alphabetical order and everybody got their turn. And the next few times that we had a visitor, this particular leader would turn to a male colleague and say, Joe Bloggs, would you please? And it was a real visible thing for him to do and a brave thing for him to do, I think. And because he was a very senior leader, actually the knock-on effect of that action meant that other people started to follow that sort of leadership and that role modeling that he was demonstrating. So that, I think, when I was thinking about this, was one of the challenges, because I put myself in that position. Nobody did it to me. It was about my confidence at the time, that leadership change and approach, but also my confidence over the years as well. I'm a bit older now and probably a bit more confident and care a bit less about people's opinions, I guess.
Well, no, that's fantastic insight. Thank you both for sharing that. So what advice do you think that you'd be able to give other women that are facing those kind of challenges? I'm not sure which one of you want to go first, but yeah, what advice would you give anybody?
Yeah. For me, it would be, if you see something that isn't right, or if you feel that something isn't right, do speak up about it, because you can only change perceptions by your actions. And it's exactly what Gemma was saying there about her senior leader within her business. He changed that culture with his actions. So I think by doing something about it, that's the only way that change is really going to happen.
Yeah, no, for sure. I certainly agree with that. And I think it just takes a bit of bravery, doesn't it? And, it might feel uncomfortable, but if you don't do it, maybe nobody else will do it, or years could go by and the same thing happens or gets repeated for other people. So I would just say, be brave, be bold, do it. When I'm a bit nervous about something, I always think, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah.
And probably when you think about that, you realise actually nothing that bad can actually happen. So actually, why not kind of do it and give it a go? And I think, the other thing that I sort of reflect upon, and again, this has come up through our Rise programme, we've had a lot of guest speakers speaking to women, because sometimes women think that we're the only ones who, we are less confident and we're the only people who have imposter syndrome and don't realise how good we are. Actually, a lot of our male leaders in the business have been really vulnerable and shared, actually, do you know what? I have that feeling too. It's more predominant perhaps, but there are male leaders that don't feel confident talking in front of people and that as well. So I think, be bold, be brave, stand up, say something, because most of the time people are good and they want to solve these issues and they want to get better. Nothing's perfect, but usually, I know that it's a minority, but usually people are well intended, and if they've said something that's offended you or put, usually it could be habit, it could be history, it could be lack of awareness. It's probably just that they don't understand. So the only way to change it is to be brave and speak up, for sure.
People don't often realize that they've said something wrong, or they've maybe used a word that's not PC anymore, and it's that education piece with people, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I mean, I remember when I announced my pregnancy to my line manager 5-6 years ago now, the first one, and he was like, oh, that's great news, that's great news. And then he was kind of really quiet, and I was like, are you okay? And he's like, well, yeah, there's some things I want to ask, but I don't know if I'm allowed to ask them, so I'm just not going to say anything. And I was like, say it, just say it how you say it. I was like, if I don't want to answer you, I will tell you I don't want to answer you, but ask me the question, it's fine. Because I think there is that other side of things, isn't there, that almost there's a lot of awareness, and now some people are too scared to have a conversation because they don't want to offend. There's that other side of it as well, which I think is really interesting.
No, I think that's a really valuable insight, Gemma, because you're absolutely right. It is that fear factor of, worrying that you are going to offend somebody with something that you might say. So, and the world has changed so much over the last 10 years, which I think for positive reasons. And I agree. I think it takes someone to take that first step in terms of making those changes. And for a senior leader, a male senior leader, to take that step is a refreshing change. And we need more of that, and less of the sort of like the individuals that don't want to speak up or don't want to implement those changes. So I think that is really, really refreshing. So thank you both for sharing that and your experiences, because it's quite personal experiences are, and you never know really whether it's something that you want to let the world know about. But thank you both for opening up and sharing that information. So have women in your workplace at all shared any thoughts on how the work-life balance progression might be affected because of the fact that they are a woman, rather than men? Because obviously men don't have maternity leave. I know they have paternity leave, but you have maternity leave, etc. And I know from my experience in the past, one of the companies I worked with, that they didn't the top man didn't really want to hire women of a certain age, just because of the simple fact is the chances of them going off onto maternity leave were quite high. And I just thought, well, that's really that's not fair. That shouldn't be the case, because it's a natural thing. You will allow men paternity leave, but because women's maternity leave is longer, you don't want to employ them because you know that you're going to have to pay maternity pay. So have you had any kind of women sharing any thoughts on the work-life balance at all, Sarah?
Yeah, so I'll share my own story,
Yeah.
if that's okay. So I have just recently returned back from maternity leave at the start of February. My baby's 10 months old now. So from the moment I announced my pregnancy, back in 2023, I fell pregnant and I announced that. I felt so supported by the company. I had hyperemesis gravidarum, which, for anyone that doesn't know what that is extreme morning sickness. Basically, you have to be on all sorts of anti-sickness tablets. Sometimes you're in hospital hooked up on a drip because you're so dehydrated. And I had quite a lot of time out of the business at the start of my pregnancy because I was just far too unwell to work, but never once did I feel unsupported. My manager checked in with me regularly. She was making sure that I was okay, that everything was under control in terms of any handovers that I needed to do, if there was meetings that people needed to pick up. She was trying to minimize me doing as much as possible. She doesn't have children of herself, so she hasn't experienced that herself, but she was extremely supportive. And I think that just sort of demonstrates our culture anyway. But that was the start of my pregnancy. Then everything was fine, thankfully, for the rest of my pregnancy. And I went off. My daughter came a little bit early, so my maternity leave started a little bit earlier than expected, but again, extremely supportive about the whole situation. And then I was kept informed of everything throughout my maternity leave. I had phone calls, text messages with my manager, so I never really felt away from the business. And
that's good.
although I'm saying this is what my manager does, we actually have what we call a maternity pack, that all of our managers follow in the business for any pregnant employees that we have. And it basically sets out what they need to do to make sure that we've got everything we need for processing that maternity leave. But there's also a section there where they agree what contact they want to have. So obviously some people, when they go off on maternity leave, they just want to enjoy the maternity leave and they don't want to speak to anyone from the business until they're ready. Some people like me have extreme FOMO and they need to know exactly everything that is going on. That. So I was kept well informed of everything that was happening, but equally, if people don't want contact from us, we will respect their wishes, and that's not an issue at all. I used all of my kit days over the course of January before coming back so that I was able to ease myself in, and that was something that was agreed not only with my manager, but our head of HR, who was extremely supportive around everything as well. And then when I came back, I had the agreement that I could use holidays instead of going to part-time working immediately as well, because obviously you still continue to accrue your holidays on your maternity leave, and I'd be coming back with essentially a full year's worth of holidays to use within a few months. So I've been able to use my holidays to have my days off as well, which has been really, really great. But I think the main thing for me is when I came back to work, I don't feel like I've been away. And
Yeah.
it was just exactly the same welcoming environment that I'd received before I went off, and I've not been treated any differently by anyone for the fact that I do 4 days a week now rather than 5. We had a number, I don't work a Monday. We had a number of meetings that would regularly happen on a Monday. They've all been rescheduled to allow me to attend.
Oh, that is so good.
Yeah.
That is amazing that they've done that. And I totally get what you're saying about the FOMO being out of the business. I still have that even if I'm off on holiday for a week,
Yeah.
and it's just like I'm always checking in on my emails just to make sure, and again, that just comes through if there's anything urgent that needs looking at, so, but that is really, really good that they've been so accommodating, because you don't get many organisations that are that accommodating.
No.
How about you, Gemma? Have you got any kind of experiences that you can share?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I won't talk maternity because I'm really fortunate. I think my experience has been very similar to Sarah's now. I've got 2 little ones and I've been back just over a year. And yeah, with 2 different managers actually for 2 different maternity leaves because of my role change. But kind of had a really similar experience with both of them. I would say, I guess the angle that I would share a couple of things from a sort of flexible working policy perspective. When I did come back, both times actually, I wanted to do a 4-day working week, so I have a Friday off. And that was supported, which was really, really good. And the first manager I had was like, sometimes he's like, I will put meetings on a Friday, but he was like, it's just because I've forgotten. It doesn't mean anything. He was like, just tell me if I do it, it'll be because I've forgotten, not because I don't value and appreciate your day off, etc. So yeah, that was funny. But the other thing that we've done to kind of, the female sort of work-life balance, we've got our flexible working policy. And I do think that's really important, because I do remember a close friend of mine actually saying to me when I was having my first child, like, you will always feel guilty now. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, well, you want to develop your career, but you want to be a good mum, you want to be a good wife, you want to be a good sister, you want to be a good auntie, you want to go to the gym. And she was like, whatever you're like, if you're at work, you'll be thinking you should be with your child, and if you're with your child, you'll be thinking you should be being at work. But I think there is an element of that, and I still have that to a certain extent, but I always just try and think, like, what's the bigger picture here? So I went to the gym this morning. My daughter was crying. She wanted mummy, not daddy. Poor daddy. She loves daddy, but she wanted mummy, which I don't mind really. But I was like, do you know what? I could stay and she'll be happy. But actually, if I go and do this, I'm going to feel better throughout the rest of my day. I'm going to be a better mum because I've had an hour to myself. I'm going to be energized. And it's a similar thing with work. I just kind of keep in mind, yes, I am going to work. She loves nursery 95% of the time, but I dropped her off last week and out of nowhere, she had a complete crying, didn't want to go in, clinging to my leg, that to peel her off me. I hate that. And I felt really bad walking down the drive out of there. I was like, oh no, am I doing the right thing? But I was like, no, I am, because I want to role model to her that she can have the career she wants. I want to enjoy the salary and benefits that I have because I want to take her on a nice holiday. And, so I think it's just mindset about keeping in mind why you're doing what you're doing, even if there are painful moments along the way. And, I think, maternity one's an easy one to talk about because, it is experienced by many females, but we've also more recently over the last few years got into looking at kind of menopause policy, because obviously there's been a huge kind of social movement and openness in talking about that. And actually, not all women will have maternity leave, but every female will have the menopause. So actually, absolutely, why do we not talk about that just as much as we talk about maternity? So again, we've done lots of webinars and seminars and training and policy and all that good stuff, but also caring responsibilities as well. And I know as lots of our women age, potentially they're having sort of time off to need to deal with issues that are cropping up with their parents, for example. So
Yeah.
and again, it's not exclusive to females, but you do tend to find that females can typically take that role, but some of our male colleagues have as well. So I think it's just looking at it, across the board, and throughout someone's life, different things are going to come in and out of focus a little bit. So it's just trying to make sure that we've got, policies and leaders that understand that, people are a whole person. They're not just Gemma at work, Gemma at home kind of thing. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, that really, really does. And I think a lot of companies could take a leaf out of both Leonardo Hotels and Smurfit Westrock's book, really, in terms of, putting in measures to overcome these challenges and prevent them from causing issues and, like you say, imposter syndrome and FOMO and, any kind of discrimination within the workplace. So I think that they're really refreshing things that are in place, measurements that are in place within the organisations. So for anybody outside of the organisation, what kind of advice would you give, them if, say, for example, they approached you and said, oh, our company doesn't do this, we don't, make these allowances or accommodations for women, whether it be for menopause or for pregnancy, etc. What kind of advice would you guys give anybody in those areas?
I think if they're not looking at doing something in those areas, they're going to miss out on some incredible candidates, and they're going to lose some amazing employees, because that is something that is so key to people at the moment. I think after the pandemic, people have really evaluated their work-life balance, and that's both male and female. And if there's, if they've got two job offers on the table and there's one that offers a more flexible working opportunity, they've got their policies in place for DEI, menopause, they do enhanced parental leave, something enhanced with carers leave perhaps as well, and there's another company who doesn't do those things, they're going to go with the one that's got the flexible and the family friendly policies.
Absolutely. And I'm assuming you would echo what Sarah's just said then, Gemma, as well, because
yeah, 100%. I mean, I feel really lucky to work in the business that I work in. It hasn't always been this way. I would say, when I first started, lots of these things weren't in place, but actually it's about evolving with the times and with society and leadership and being more open to it. I do totally agree with Sarah from a talent perspective. If you don't have those things in place, or you're not even having conversations about those things, then you should be.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I think, if there are individuals in those organisations, they could be really good businesses, but maybe they're just not aware. So again, if you're brave enough, have the conversation with an appropriate leader and say, hey, look, do you know, there are other organisations, these are types of things they're doing. Could we consider this? I'm happy to be involved in a project to do some research. It could, it could create a bit of an opportunity just to get the conversation started. There's loads of things, there's lots of things cost time and money and resource, don't they? But there's loads of things that actually you can do that don't have, huge resource implications. Because again, I know there are lots of businesses, from a resourced cost perspective, are really in control of those things. But you don't have to, I guess there's the gold standard, but actually there are steps towards, we didn't get to where we were overnight. It's been a long journey. We're still not perfect. There's a long way to go, but I think there's steps that you can take. And sometimes it's just about having a conversation, which doesn't take any money. It takes a bit of time, but sometimes it's just understanding the perspective of the females in your organisation, because they might not all want the same thing, like a women's network, for example. That's something we've set up a few years ago now. It's led not by the HR team, but by some women that were interested. It's absolutely thriving. They cover all sorts of topics. There's no cost to that. There's a Viva Engage platform that we've set up for them, but they run it. They have webinars, they have discussions. It's simply, they share photos. They, there'd be messages. Has anyone got any advice on this situation? So it doesn't have to be a big kind of resource drain. I think steps towards it are really important. And if you're an organisation that doesn't have that, ask for it? What have you got? Again, what's the worst thing that can happen? They say no. You have a choice to make. You know.
Exactly, and it just takes those small steps, doesn't it, really, to then turn into bigger steps, and then having a great result of the overall picture, you know, and having those measures put in place. So I think you're absolutely right. If you know, that one conversation could spark off a whole series of new measures that are put in place to make sure that women feel that they're being accommodated and they have that flexible working schedule and a good work-life balance, really. So that would be my advice as well, just have those conversations. But again, then sometimes I feel like, you know, people might not have that confidence to have the conversation because they feel like, well, I might get persecuted for this, or I might just get, oh, look, she wants to do this or she wants to do that. So again, it's overcoming that fear factor, like you say, and what fear is only the unknown, really, isn't it? It's not what you know, it's the things that you don't know is where the fear then sets in. So it's just overcoming that fear and taking that first step to having that conversation with a line manager or somebody, just to say, look, hey, can we look at this? But that's really valuable. Thank you both for your insight on that. That is absolutely brilliant advice that you've given us. So do you think there are any other kind of barriers that women are facing at the moment in the workplace, aside from maternity and menopause, etc.? Do you find that there are any other barriers within the workplace?
Yeah, so perhaps not really an example within Leonardo Hotels, but maybe something across the wider employment market, I think, is a real lack of senior role models. So people who are at that senior leadership level, the executive or board level, for example. And luckily for us, 53% of our managers are female, and we have that right up to the very top, which is really, really great. But in previous companies that I've worked in and in various networking events that I've been to, often you find that the very senior leadership teams are still all male. And I think, as Gemma's mentioned before, there is that imposter syndrome, and women don't apply to jobs if they don't tick all the boxes. So they're not putting themselves forward for these opportunities. And that's something that we really try to break down in Leonardo as well. Gemma's spoken about her RISE program. We've got similar programs within Leonardo as well. And that starts from taking someone who can be doing a role out on the hotel floor. They get built up into a duty manager, then head of department, right up to hotel manager, general manager level. And then we have development programs at that level called high potential as well, to develop them even further in their roles. We've got funding for people to do their masters, MBAs, things like that. And that's across the whole board. It's not just for females, it is for all of our employees, but it's just to try and develop those individuals to the best of their ability and showcase their talents within the business, so that there's someone for people to look up to, like Gemma said about making sure her daughter's got that role model as well. I think that's important in the workplace as well for young people, but also other employees, to have someone and they can see, well, if she's doing it, why can't I?
Absolutely. I definitely agree. You would agree with that as well, Gemma, because it is, it's very valuable. But I also find that it depends on the industry as well, with the higher levels of women in sort of like senior roles. Because if you're in a very male-dominated industry, then women probably don't feel that confident, regardless of your experience and your knowledge and your skill sets. It might just be a case of, well, that's going to be very male-dominated. Will I feel comfortable in that environment, etc. So there are lots, I suppose, in my opinion, there are lots of challenges in various different industries because of whether they be male dominated or whether it's, like you say, imposter syndrome, etc. But I definitely think we need to have more of a female presence at board level with all across the board of all industries. And I think it's fantastic that you've got over 50% of female managers in Leonardo Hotels. What's the ratio at Smurfit Westrock, Gemma, in terms of women and management?
So it depends on what level you looked at, really. We've got like lots of different groups of companies, if that makes sense. From a UK&I perspective, we are still male dominated in leadership roles. But I think what gives me confidence, like, let's fast forward another 10 years, that things will be different. Actually, we look at our sort of pipelines of talent. So who are the people that are sort of ready now to take those next roles? Who's likely to be ready with development in the next 1 to 3 years? And who's likely to be ready sort of 3 to 5 years? And then our sort of longer range talent. And why I feel confident it's going to change, if I look at that sort of talent pipeline, I can see now, even over the last 12 months, we've doubled the amount of people in that pipeline that are female. So I think in that we're at about 40% to 60% male. So it's still not 50-50, but we used to be at like 10-15%, we're now at 40. And again, if I go back then almost like a step beyond that pipeline, we're doing lots of stuff around early career talent development. So when people first join us and getting them ready for leadership positions, again, if I look there, we're sort of almost 50-50, not quite, but yeah, we're getting there. But I think, it's, it can bring you onto a conversation then, like, we don't do kind of quota recruitment. It is about the best person for the role. But it's trying to make the playing field even, to try and give women the confidence and the best possible opportunity. Sometimes a male will be better placed to do a particular role, and that's not because of their gender, it's because of their skills and their experiences and other things. So it's trying to make sure that women have a fair and equal opportunity and the confidence, and then making that objective assessment. So yeah, we've got room to go for sure, but it is getting better, and it takes time, doesn't it? Because you've got this pipeline of people and you've got to bring them through at an appropriate rate, so they are ready and they do feel developed for it.
Rather than just jumping in too soon and not being ready. But I think that's amazing, the steps that you've taken so far, and to go from 10% to 40%, that's still an achievement in itself. So I think what Leonardo Hotels and Smurfit Westrock are doing are absolutely amazing initiatives. And if more companies could take a leaf out of your book, then I think there'd be a lot more to offer women in the workplace, basically. Obviously, you've mentioned the mentorship programs with the Rise, and I'm so sorry, Sarah, I've forgotten what yours was called. Hyper.
Oh, we've got so many. We start off we've got Accelerate, Fast Forward, but yeah, High Potential. We've got a variety of them.
Yeah, so I think you've got some great mentorship programs going on within the organisations, and I think more companies could take a leaf out of your book, basically, in terms of putting those measures in place and those initiatives in place to help other women in the workplace. So I really want to thank you both so much for sharing your insights. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add to this, or any other areas that you want to cover off today.
Probably not. No, I think just for me, it's all around education and speaking up.
And that's fantastic. Okay, that's brilliant. So my last question would be then, I know you've already said, Gemma, about where you expect it to be in 10 years. So what do you expect the future of the workplace for women is likely to be in the next 10 years then? How do you foresee that happen, progressing?
I think that's the hardest question you've asked us.
Sorry. I know, it's like you get your crystal ball and
I know. Yeah, go on, Sarah, what's your view?
Oh, I just hope that it's not even a topic, to be honest.
I know,
I hope that we're at that point where everything, everyone has that equity in the workplace. Because when we look back to the 10 years before then, in your business, Gemma, women didn't even have an appropriate uniform. In my business, women had to wear high heels all day on their feet. So yeah, I would just hope that it's not even a topic, and women can come to work, they can be their whole selves, they can feel represented, they don't have imposter syndrome, hopefully, and they can just shine.
I agree. I suffer from imposter syndrome myself anyway, so I I hope, like you, Sarah, that we're not having these conversations in 10 years' time, and it is equal. I mean, avoiding the obvious, the pay gap, for women and men. I think that is changing slowly as the years go on. So hopefully, in 10 years' time, then, like you say, we won't be having these conversations, and it will just be a natural progression, and it will be a natural thing to have more women on the board, equal pay, and more sort of like suitable uniforms where women feel more comfortable and not having to wear high heels in certain industries. So I think with any luck, we will make those strides in order to eliminate those challenges that women are facing in the workplace. So I really want to thank you both so much for your time and your insights today. It's been really invaluable to me, and I'm sure to our guests here. So if any of our guests have got any questions, then please feel free to put them in the chat. We've still got a few minutes left, if you want to ask any questions, then fire away. But it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you both today, and I really want to thank you for your time. And again, obviously, to our audience, if you do have any questions, then fire them in the chat, and then hopefully we'll be able to get round to answering them, at some point, and give you some advice or guidance if you feel that you need it. But yeah, I would just like to end this then by saying thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much, Sarah and Gemma, for joining us today and for your valuable insights. It really has been such a pleasure to speak with you both today. Okay. So I guess
good to have a conversation.
Thank you so much for inviting us on.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for taking the time to do so. Okay, so if any questions do come up in the chat, I'll be here on there. So hopefully, if it's directed towards Gemma or Sarah, then I can pass those questions on, and maybe we can sort of like build a dialogue on that. We'll be able to answer any questions that you may have. But if there's nothing coming up in the chat that I can't see at the moment, then I guess this will be the end of our webinar, our first webinar, and we will hopefully have many more. So thank you both very much for this morning, and thank you to our audience as well. We really appreciate the time that you've taken to join us this morning.